Welcome to my classic bike review of my beautiful Honda VFR750F. Very brief history on these. Honda originally came out with a VF750, which was a V4 engine, the same as this. But the problem was they didn't make it as well as they could have. So the cams, the cam chains, the top end of the bike generally just wasn't very reliable, and they got themselves a very bad reputation, which obviously cost Honda a lot of money. So what they needed to do was bring confidence back to the consumer by bringing out the VFR750. Now this bike is over-engineered. It's got an aluminium frame and swing arm on it, and instead of a cam chain, these have actually got cam gears. It's a really clever idea, and it gives them a most beautiful whistle when you rev them. You'll hear that in a bit. And since these came out, they were originally started off as a sports bike, but they soon got relegated to a sports tourer. And that's because things like the GSXR 750 were already out, and they were obviously a lot more sportier than these. Having said that, a GP racer, MotoGP racer called Ron Haslam, took one of these to third place in the wet at what we call the transatlantic races in Donington, and it was basically standard. I think they could change the tyres or something on it. So it's a 6-speed 750cc. The USA got a 700cc because of their very expensive big bike tax laws, but we never saw them over here. In the UK they were called a VFR. They called them the Interceptor in America. In America the CBR 600 was called the Hurricane, the 750 the Interceptor, the 600 Kawasaki was a Ninja. We didn't really start adopting names for bikes until later on. So 104-ish, 100 to 104 horsepower this bike is. And the weight is possibly around 240 kilos. It's not very light, but the V4 block is a very, very big engine. I purchased this a few years ago, and it had got scrapes down the side of it. All the alloy was bubbling up. So I didn't do a full restoration, but I did have the bike fully resprayed in the most beautiful pearl white colour. Unfortunately, I caught that on the handlebar of my 350 power valve and chipped it, which I'm gutted about. The exhausts on these were normally a 4x2 exhaust, so they were really nicely balanced, but unfortunately when I got this one it only had the single exhaust, maybe because the other one had rotted. This seat is actually a dual seat. All this is a cover. So cracking the baby up, it's got very dated looking 80s dash on it, hasn't it? And if you hear the starter motor, it's got a funny whistle to it. It still works, I'm not too worried about that, but it's not how it should sound. Listen to that engine. I mean, I'm hardly touching that throttle, and everything feels so revvy. So we're going to go for a little play and see how it feels. With the 750, when you first climb on them, they're very low. A lot of 80s bikes do seem to have quite a low seat height, but when you're riding them, the VFR is one of the few, if only, bikes I've ever ridden that feels like you've owned it forever when you first ride it. The riding position's quite sporty, but not nearly as bad as the Ducati 748s and those type of things. The clutch on it is incredibly light, as is the throttle, and the gearbox, and I've described this with the Triumph, is just pure butter. Absolutely beautifully smooth. You do get quite a lot of wind blast, and that's the same with my Honda Turbo as well. So probably a couple of inch flip up on the screen wouldn't go amiss. It goes around corners like it's on rails. That frame is so strong, it's beautiful. The engine, being a V4, is incredibly torquey. So I'm going to put it into 6th gear. I wouldn't normally do this because it's quite a revvy engine, but I'm in 6th gear now at just over 40 miles an hour. Staying in 6 while this car turns. I'm going to just open the throttle up. And it just pulls so cleanly. This particular model is a carburetted model. So they started off with carburetors, and a little bit later on they brought out a VFR750 that was fuel injected, that I personally really did not get on with, and I tried 2 of them. The seats were uncomfortable, the fuel injection mapping wasn't very nice on them, and they just felt a little more top heavy too. So I think it's the second model that Honda have come out with, in my opinion, where they've actually taken a step backwards by bringing newer models out. And the other one is my ST1100, when they brought the 1300 out. I did not like the 13 at all. So I bring it down to a corner, a couple of gears, that's the one, hold it steady, and it just drives you out of the corners beautifully. This particular model is actually a Mark II. It looks very similar to the Mark I. When you first look at it, you can't tell much difference at all. But on the Mark II, it's got 17-inch front wheels instead of a 16. It's got a fuel gauge on it, which is very handy. The indicators are built into the fairing a little bit more, and there's just a couple of tiny little cosmetic changes, but generally it's still the same well-proven bike. Later on, from 1990 onwards, this is an 89 model by the way, they brought out bikes with a single-sided rear swing arm, and they were fantastic as well, all the way up to around 97-ish, when they made the last of the VFR750s. They were still amazing bikes to ride. I'm going to go up to the 40 speed limit in first. The engine has just got the most incredible V4 growl to it. And those of you that know me will know that I just love V engines. They've got such character to them, V-twins or V4s. Or even the Ducati, as they call it, L-twin, which I still call a V-twin anyway. And there's just something about these engines that just give them almost a soul. Yes, I'm being weird. There's nobody behind me. Let's do a little tunnel rev. Everything about them just is so free revving. It almost feels like a 2-stroke when it's on the power band. So the brakes do the job. They're not fantastic by today's standards, but they stop the bike, they do it absolutely fine, nothing special. The back brake actually has a little bit more feel than bikes of their era. For example, the early CBR 600 rear brake really wasn't much at all. You'll be amazed at how cheap these things are to pick up. If you want a rusty tip, these are the next classic. I think I only paid about £800 for this one, but it's cost me probably about the same again to get it all painted up and cleaned up, etc. But for the sort of money that you pay for these and the performance they give, and personally I think they're a gorgeous looking bike as well. I think they're worth every penny, and they're just on that verge of going up into classic status. So if you want yourself a nice cheap bike that won't go down in value, then the VFR750 from 1986 all the way through to 1997 will be a very, very good buy for you. Hope you've enjoyed this brief review. Stay tuned for another upload. Remember to comment, like and subscribe in whatever order you want to do it in, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.